So there's a discussion that I've been meaning to get to as of late, and that is the potential of us having some more beast candidates. Now, as the question goes, if you could choose any existing servant to turn into a beast, which one would you choose? What sin would they have? What would be their nega skill? And what would be their origin? So I'm gonna go past the nega skill and their sin just for the sake of the video, but I am gonna give their origin. Most of the responses in the comments are pretty typical: full-fledged Angra that could have came from Fate Stay Night, full-fledged Tamamo, which if our Tamamo is anything to go by, she would easily be one of the strongest enemies that we've ever faced. Again, Merlin, he's always had potential to become a beast, mostly because of him having this front seat grasp on humanity and only deciding to intervene at the last minute, but that could very easily go the other way. And all of these are fine, I want to see those for sure, especially Tamamo. I've always considered that Tamamo is something that we'll get eventually. If you consider all the build up between FGO and the extraverse, I feel like it just has to happen at some point. But the way that I took the question personally is the unnamed servants. Out of all the characters that we have so far, who do you feel like has the potential to become a beast who hasn't been outright fed to us? So this begs the question, okay, what is a beast? Generally, a beast is accepted as somebody that internalizes, they shoulder the blame of humanity to the point where they might dive into the realm of wickedness just to get their point across. Naturally, this could come at the expense of the world as we know it. The desolation of our people, like Goetia, the devastation of the planet, like Kiara, or the destruction of both, like Big Mama Tiamat. When I think of these things, there's a couple of people that I have that come to mind. So I'll kick things off with Emiya Assassin and Emiya Alter. Now, in my other video, I made the joke about people asking me to do the lore on these characters. And I said, find me some lore for these characters. And what I mean by that is, for the amount of time that FGO has been around, which is going on 8 years, these characters have popped up in a few chapters here and there, but their actual background is very bare bones. It's just enough to say that they're around. And I know they're not the only ones, but it's surprising to see that from them, knowing who they are. I mean, these are OGs back from Shinjuku and Fate Zero Excel. They've been around for that long. So what I would like to see is them have some beast counterparts, and that way we finally can flesh them out more. We already know that both of these characters are very capable of destroying the world to meet their goals. The only reason Kiritsugu didn't pursue this in Fate Zero is because he started to realize that nothing would come out of it. But if he saw that Angra would give him the wish with no strings attached, then he would have continued. Same thing with Emiya Alter. He's crude, he's ruthless, he just wants to get the job done. He would prefer to avoid casualties, but for him that's something that's never completely off of the table. And this is the main reason why I chose Emiya Alter as opposed to somebody like Shiro and Emiya. The difference between Shiro and their ideals is the willingness to want to harm people. Shiro didn't want to harm people. If you remember the contract, the only reason that Emiya kept doing what he was doing is because he was already locked in. He had no idea what the contract was going to be prior to getting into it. And ultimately, he just ended up turning into Kiritsugu anyway, which was taking out the least amount of people to save the greater amount of people. But that's the difference. Shiro and Emiya didn't want to do it. Emiya Alter and Kiritsugu, they will. And for Kiritsugu, I'm mostly talking about his human version. You can throw some humans in there if you want to. I just didn't want to clog up the title. But yeah, Sig and Amakusa, they are also two characters based on their background. They will do this. And I've always felt like Sig's drive to save humanity is off course, especially considering that he's not a human himself. That's just one thing. The other thing is, if you remember Sig's story, the first thing that Sig saw when he came out into the world was evil. When he came out, he saw his brethren being thrown into a juicer and used for energy. That's the first thing that he saw when he entered this world. So to completely ignore that and still try to make him a just character, I feel like they dropped the ball on some really good potential. His whole thing is an existential crisis, trying to figure out whether or not he should side with humanity or not. I made a video about him years ago, and this is when the show was still airing. This is before it even hit the second season. And I said, I don't like the way that this is going. And I vividly remember a guy popping out to defend him. You know how people get when you talk about their favorites. Oh, you don't understand his character. For all you know, he could turn evil. That guy was completely wrong, but I wouldn't mind seeing him go through those motions as a beast. They went out of their way to make Amakusa out to be the villain, but the whole time I was rooting for him. It's like I got a method to save humanity, and it's actually not half bad, and he is willing to make the sacrifice for it. And Sig just comes in like, nope, I'm not gonna let you do that. It's like, what makes you think that you have a say in this conversation to begin with? A guy that's literally seen the worst of humanity right in front of his eyes in the Shimabara Rebellion versus a guy that's been alive for 2 weeks at best. Yeah, you sure know a lot about the world in 14 days. I've always felt like that was backwards. So I'd love to see that. It pretty much goes without saying, and this is of course piggybacking off of the theory that's been going around for years, the idea of Ritsuka and Mash turning evil. And we even had hints of this in the game. Now, I don't want them to turn evil specifically because one, I feel like it would ruin the trajectory of their characters. It's an overused trope. They're really good characters. I don't want them to turn into mwahahaha, I'm evil now. But I do like the idea. So what I would like to see is them using this idea but putting a spin on it. Have somebody at Chaldea, some unnamed character that's been taking data or samples from us the entire time that we've been going through FGO. And with it, they've manufactured some type of counterparts to us. Now, they're not one-to-one counterparts, they're not clones. But since they're created from us, they do have traits and likeness that resembles ours. Now that I think about it, it almost sounds like Captain America. It's kind of like that. Maybe the guy that's creating this sees all the things that we're going through and believes that it would be easier if there were more people like us, so it could lighten the load for the future and we don't end up going insane from the pressure. Except when they come out, they end up going their own way. They have our skills, they have our intelligence, just not exactly us. And I want it to be a situation of our ideals versus their ideals. I want them to come and challenge us the same way we went to those lost belts and eradicated everything there claiming to be the just ones, which was really just unspoken genocide just to save our timeline. Where do we get off? I want us to be tried the same way. And then one of them becomes a beast. And while we're on the Lost Belts, the Lost Belt Kings, I was just gonna use Ivan, but what is a Lost Belt King? The entire idea behind them is that they're bolstering their own territory to swallow the other Lost Belts and reforge the new world. It doesn't matter who gets in the way, and it was never a thing of they're doing it out of evil. They just want to grow their society. The reason that I was reaching toward Ivan first is because it never felt like he was doing anything wrong. The idea of being a beast, you loving humanity, or specifically here, you loving your own kind, who's to say that a Lost Belt King isn't just loving their own kind to the point where they get consumed by it and they turn into a beast? Straddling off the back of that, Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is unarguably one of the most impactful people in human history. I'm sure he never thought of it as something that's technically evil. Military commanders never do. But I can definitely see how it would be viewed as evil from the other side, because from their point of view, you're just going around taking from everybody else. And that's my point. Usually when a commander subjugates, it just ends in the betterment of his society. When Alexander did his subjugations, it ended in the betterment of mankind. So in my head, I can see him being a beast with this mindset of, I just want to progress humanity, and he ends up being consumed by it. We got Gilgamesh. And going back to my Joker video, if we remove Shakespeare from the equation, we already know that Gil and Merlin are much alike. We already know that Merlin is an official potential candidate. There's no reason to say that Gil wouldn't be the same thing. He was more than willing to flood the entire earth, and it was never a matter of haha, I'm doing this out of evil. The way he saw it, he was doing it for the betterment of mankind. The thing about Gil is, he's usually the person that sits on the side and lets it happen. But in Fate Stay Night specifically, out of all the things he could have did with his incarnation, he specifically sought out Ilya as a catalyst. He specifically sought out Shinji as a vessel. He manufactured a Greater Grail rift with his own hands. The only thing he didn't do was rampage the world himself. Who's to say that we couldn't get a version of Gilgamesh where his rationale plunges him into the driver's seat, yet he's claiming that he's doing it for the better of us? You have Darius Ainsworth. If you're familiar with Prisma Ilya, Darius not only went leaps and bounds for his displacement magecraft, but he's also done this with the intentions to remap the world and become God with the involvement of Pandora's box. The dude essentially created an EOS Lost Belt. We don't have to wonder whether or not Darius would go to the ends of Earth to reach his goal, because he's already done it. He wants to reforge the world to his own liking, and that could very easily entail an alternate version of him becoming part of the Beast class. It would make for a great event. It would be a good way to ease him into FGO. We haven't had a Prisma Ilya event in years. That would be a great way to bring that back around. We got servants that we still need to hit the surface. Angelica, Beatrice, who literally has Mjolnir, and then she's intertwined with Magni's spirit. Now we do know this is because of the class card, but it's nothing to make a FGO counterpart where that becomes official and she just becomes a vessel. I'm giving you a whole event. I'm giving you the game right now, Type Moon. That's free money on the table. Nasu, lasagna, make it happen. And the last one I gotta give up is my girl Nobu. Again, this one is a lot like Alexander. If we're just going off of her background alone, you got the burning of Enryaku Temple, where she burned the entire temple full of monks to the ground. If it reaches that scale, she will do it. And then you got Fate taking this even further, making her the demon king of the sixth heaven. So in her mind, it's not a matter of evil, it's just a matter of order. And she's really moving like a true military commander. She's ran through several humans because in her mind, her plan is better. And you know what would be crazy? And this kind of just gets into a whole nother video. I've been digging into stuff like Marvel and DC. It would be interesting if some of these new beasts worked as a collaborative effort, like a Legion of Doom. And then by extension, the Counterforce starts to give us grand extra classes, because I've seen a lot of people talking about that. That would be a wild way to bring that in.